This is my response to the book, Teaching What Really Happened, How to Avoid the Tyranny of Textbooks and Get Students Excited About Doing History by James Loewen. In reading the book, the most poignant section for me was Chapter 2, Expecting Excellence. In this chapter, Loewen points out the disparities of test scores and how standardized tests affect teachers' expectations of students, which also then affects student performance in class. Test scores are not the only factors that affect teacher expectation. There have been many studies done that prove with reasonable significance that appearance impacts a teacher's expectations of a student as well as the student's scores on previous tests. Students of color are not expected to do as well as white students, and students that appear to be more confident are expected to do much better than a student who is perceived as meek. The argument Loewen makes is that teachers' expectations of students differ from student to student and is often perceived by the students. The students in turn respond to the teacher's unintentionally raised or lowered expectations through their performance. At the high school where I work, teachers are encouraged to look up the EVOS data on students. EVOS data for each student shows scores on past tests and then also what each student is predicted to score on the next test. As a novice teacher asking veterans around me what to do with this data, the advice I received was, it's easy to grow a low score, but hard to grow a high score. You gotta work on those high scores. In looking at these two examples of EVOS data sets, which student should I be working on? One student is predicted to score in the 17th percentile, and the other student is predicted to score in the 99th percentile. Loewen argues, and I agree, that teachers should have high expectations for each and every one of their students, and should challenge their students and believe in their students' abilities regardless of their background or appearance or GPA. Students need someone to push them before they can push themselves. There are great chasms between cultures, especially in the United States. The United States is a huge country with many different regions and many different cultures. In a data-driven age, people are constantly looking for the validity of their abilities. Standardized tests have been accepted widely as a measurement of student aptitude, or how well a student will be able to do once they make it to college. Loewen argues that tests such as the SAT have been proven to be biased toward the average, discounting many cultures and leading to high test scores for people living in certain parts of the country and low test scores for people living in other parts of the country. Even though it has been argued that the SAT does not accurately measure aptitude, and as such the name SAT has been changed to reflect that, now it's just called the SAT rather than SAT that stands for Student Aptitude Test or Student Assessment Test. People still place value on their SAT scores. Many students who take the SAT internalize the number that is given, their score. They take this number to heart, believing that there is value in that number, that number is the number that determines their future, that their score on the SAT or ACT or even their NCFE determines how smart they are. It then becomes the task of the teacher to disprove the value of that number. I tell my students all the time that numbers matter a whole lot less to me than who they are and what they do. When my students ask me if I know their grade in my class, I tell them I have to look it up because I don't remember numbers. I remember names and I remember faces. In a reading from MDSK 6354 on motivational theory, Dr. Hefner states that there is a difference between motivation and ability. Motivation is what a person will attempt, and ability is what a person can do. A student's perceptions of themselves, or a student's perception of himself and herself, determines what the student will attempt, regardless of if they are able. If the student doesn't think he or she will be successful in a task, then the likelihood of he or she attempting that task is diminished greatly. As Loewen states, the disparities of test scores between races are widest in social studies because it depends upon a student's exposure to mainstream American culture, access to which varies widely across the nation. If students have not had success in previous history courses, then when asked to engage in yet another history course, they are not likely to jump into it full of enthusiasm. In her seminal work, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, Carol Dweck encourages educators to focus on effort rather than ability. This is the idea of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. It goes along with the power of not yet, where students are encouraged to say, I don't understand it yet, or I don't get this yet, emphasizing that eventually, through dedication, through hard work, they can get it eventually. So Carol Dweck reminds teachers that where students score on a test determines where a student is, not where a student will end up. It is up to the teachers to expect great things from their students and push them to achieve greater heights. Angela Duckworth, whose research goes along very well with Carol Dweck's, wrote a book called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, where she emphasizes that ability is a good thing, and talent helps out, but it is the passion and perseverance, the ability to work hard, to accept failures and work through them is what makes an athlete great, or whatever a person pursues. And so Angela Duckworth points out in her book that nothing can be accomplished without effort. And so both Dweck and Duckworth argue against limiting students by only expecting out of students what they have demonstrated in previous courses. James Lowen proclaims very steadfastly that history courses taught in innovative ways can challenge students to do excellent work, some for the first time. All people have strengths and weaknesses. Lowen, Dweck, and Duckworth all encourage teachers to encourage students. Teachers must have high expectations and be willing to recognize the variance between students' strengths and weaknesses. Lowen does a more than adequate job of providing methods for teachers that produce a better and more accurate instruction in the history classroom. The methods provided in this book allow all students access to success at one point or another. But before any of these strategies can work, Lowen, Dweck, Duckworth, and many other educators would probably agree with this statement, that success for both teachers and students rely on expectations, that teachers have to believe in their students, and students have to believe in themselves before anything can be accomplished, and that before people can grow. There are my references. Carol Dweck, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Angela Duckworth, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Tina Hefner, Explanation of Motivational Theory, Why Students Approach or Avoid Tasks. And then James Lowen, Teaching What Really Happened.